Having been a physician for so long, I want to just talk about the real importance of metabolic health. So let's just define that term.
Yeah, metabolic health. Metabolic health is essentially all the processes your body goes through to convert essentially macronutrients into energy in order for our bodies to conduct its physiologic functions.
So why is it so important? Why should people be concerned about their metabolic health?
Because individuals that have suboptimal metabolic health, and I would actually broaden it to cardiometabolic health, because certainly our metabolic health impacts our heart, and our heart, heart disease being the number one killer, they go in hand. And so we should be concerned. Unfortunately, there's a higher proportion, not only in the United States, but globally, we're seeing a lot of overweight and obesity. And so oftentimes when we're referring to metabolic health, it's in that context of individuals suffering from overweight obesity. And typically, you have comorbid, quote unquote, conditions such as things like diabetes or prediabetes, high cholesterol, high blood pressure. And these are all kind of interrelated.
So how do you know? What are the measurements or what are the data points to indicate that you have poor metabolic health?
I love that question. So, I think we talk about vital signs in medicine. And so blood pressure is certainly important, knowing your systolic and your diastolic blood pressure. Your blood pressure varies heartbeat by heartbeat, but having a sense of what your average blood pressure is, ideally close to 120 over 80, that's kind of ideal. And so that's high blood pressure is a major risk factor for heart disease and cardiometabolic health. Additionally, weight, of course, is important, but body mass index is an old measure, we've used for a long, long time, accounting for the individual's weight in kilograms divided by their height in meters squared. That definitely gives us some idea. However, it doesn't tell us the whole picture, because you could have an individual with elevated body mass index who's highly muscular and athletic, and at the same time, someone who has high fat mass, and who is not healthy, who has high cardiometabolic risk, and so it's not going to kind of have that nuance. But oftentimes what we add to that is, for example, waist circumference. So that could kind of guide us and assess. Of course, abdominal obesity has a higher implication in terms of cardiometabolic risk than fat below the waist. So I think that's important. So waist circumference, but beyond kind of those vital signs, I would say, laboratory tests, and, the standard, a lot of primary care doctors order the typical, hemoglobin A1C, that's for diabetes, prediabetes screening. It gives us an assessment of what your blood sugar has been on average over the past 3 months. Things like your typical lipid panel, your total cholesterol, your triglycerides, your LDL cholesterol, your HDL cholesterol. So these are all really important. On top of that, just generally knowing your kidney and liver function, that's part of your comprehensive metabolic panel, looking at your creatinine, your BUN, your ALT, AST, alkaline phosphatase, bilirubin, albumin. You want to know what your electrolytes are, what your fasting blood sugar is. So that's all part of what we call the comprehensive metabolic panel, a test that's been around for a long, long time and is really foundational in medicine. But beyond that, I would like to check thyroid function. Typically a TSH with a reflex T4. I think the free T4 is also important. You could do more nuanced kind of thyroid testing as well. Certainly like a fasting insulin. Fasting insulin can be used in concert with a fasting blood sugar to calculate something called a HOMA-IR score. HOMA-IR score gives you an indicator of does this individual have insulin resistance? And so that could be a marker actually that we can detect before you start seeing things like prediabetes and diabetes and elevated blood sugars, just because we tend to have spikes in insulin before that. So that calculation is very insightful. But I could keep going. Hormones, of course,
Yeah,
sex hormones,
sure.
your
Sure.
total testosterone, free, bioavailable, Those are important. Certainly, even estrogen, progesterone. Checking a DHEAS, especially in women. Women who have polycystic ovary syndrome, for example, could have elevated testosterone levels, and they have kind of like physical manifestations of hirsutism, which is basically the body hair in areas where they don't typically do. They could have issues with menstruation and fertility, of course, weight gain. But yeah, besides those ones, I mean, uric acid, homocysteine, high sensitivity CRP. We're checking now, like there's more kind of really insightful labs in terms of cardiovascular risk, and your ApoB, your lipoprotein little a. So these are kind of tests that traditionally we haven't been checking in medicine, especially like in primary care. I think there's a lack of education, but more and more, I think doctors are kind of getting on the bandwagon. Certainly patients or individuals are becoming more informed, and really educating their doctors, in
Yeah,
fact, to be like, hey, I want these tests. So
exactly.